It's proven elusive so far, but EU representatives are attempting to hammer out an agreement on an embargo on Russian oil imports. Leaders are gathering in Brussels, hoping to reach a deal on a sixth round of sanctions against Moscow. But talks over a possible embargo stalled on Sunday, with Hungary the main opponent. It says any ban on imports of Russian oil would cross a red line. Meanwhile, oil traders are waiting to see if a deal materialises. Crude prices have hit their highest point in more than 2 months. Well, for more on this, let's cross to our correspondent in Brussels, Barbara Vazel. Barbara, it's great to have you with us. So who and what is getting in the way of this oil embargo actually being agreed?
We've just seen him, this is Viktor Orban, of course, who has put up the main partly political and then partly economical resistance against this oil embargo. And the longer this battle goes on, the more difficult it seems to become. I mean, this is almost a month now that the European Union is trying to get this over the line. It becomes more and more intractable. Viktor Orban was the first one to say, I say no, I say no, I say no to this because Hungary is a landlocked country and we totally rely on oil from Russia. And Slovakia and the Czech Republic are relatively in the same boat. But the political resistance really mostly comes from him. And then, of course, other countries found they can hide behind Viktor Orban because they all feel that, of course, it's difficult to, within several months, towards the end of the year, replace Russian oil imports by others. And so it drags itself on, and it doesn't look good for the summit. There are no real hopes, you mentioned it already, Rob, that the leaders can sort of cut this knot and come to a conclusion.
Is there any way around these objections from the Hungarians, sort of a more creative solution?
Of course, this is the European Union. I mean, they live and thrive off creative solutions. Now, what they've tried to do is say, OK, let's split this. We phase out towards the end of the year all oil coming in by tanker, which is the majority, around 70, maybe up to 80%. The EU uses is being transported by tanker. But we exempt from this the Druzhba pipeline. That's the pipeline that runs from Russia to Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, Poland and Germany. Now, Poland and Germany, they can help themselves. They can bring in oil by other means, but the three landlocked countries would be exempt for 2 years. And even to that, Viktor Orban says, the Hungarian Prime Minister says no. I mean, many suspect, of course, that there are political reasons and his closeness to President Putin behind this. But everybody here in Brussels says, and particularly diplomats, it's technical, it's difficult, because we need a level playing field with regard to the access to oil. And if an exemption is made for some, the others get angry. And, of course, banning oil by tankers, Greece, for instance, comes up and says, yeah, why punish us? Because they, of course, have a strong shipping sector. So whatever you do, it's difficult, and they don't manage to get together.
Yes, as ever, it's always difficult to get those 27 member states all pulling in the same direction, isn't it? Barbara Vazel in Brussels for us. Thank you very much.
European leaders are meeting today in Brussels to try to agree on Russian oil sanctions following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. But the two-day European Council meeting is being complicated by opposition from Hungary, which is heavily dependent on Russian oil and objects to a full ban. EU leaders are expected to consider a compromise, which would allow Hungary to continue receiving oil via a pipeline, with sanctions only stopping shipments via the sea. Well, leaders at today's European Council meeting will also discuss more funds to help Ukraine rebuild, possibly paid for by confiscating Russian assets abroad. A little earlier, I spoke to Torbjörn Becker from the Stockholm Institute of Transition Economics, how that might work.
Well, I think it will work, but it will probably take quite some time. I mean, we already have the frozen assets seized, but it's a matter of how can they be used. And that's going to take some legal processing before we can make sure that the money actually reaches Ukraine and can be used for the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Now, you and your team have tried to calculate costs of a reconstruction and the damage to Ukraine's economy. What was the result, and how do you calculate these things in an ongoing war?
Well, this is an effort led by the Kyiv School of Economics, and they basically document the damage to buildings and roads and ports and airports, etc. And as of today, that number is now over 100 billion US dollars in damage just to infrastructure. So it's a number that keeps increasing every day the war goes on, basically.
So one big topic at today's EU Council meeting then are the sanctions on oil imports from Russia. So far, Hungary is not backing them. How important is this embargo and that it is a full embargo?
I think it's very important that we limit Russia's access to foreign exchange. And of course, an oil embargo is a very efficient way of doing that. Hungary itself is, of course, not one of the biggest customers in Europe for Russian oil. So in some sense, it wouldn't make that much of a difference in terms of limiting foreign exchange going to Russia. But of course, it's symbolic to keep the EU united. So from that perspective, we want EU to be part of Hungary to be part of the EU package, but really on the financial side, it's not such a big deal, I would say.
Well, don't you think that others, if an exemption is being made for Hungary and other countries who also receive pipeline oil, would want the same?
Well, it's a matter, I think, also of a bit of name and shame here. How do you want your country to be seen by the rest of the world and from a Ukrainian perspective? So I think we have seen President Zelensky in quite a few speeches pointing out Hungary as a special case, and he wants them to reconsider. I don't think most leaders in Europe would want to be on his list when he talks about what we can do more to support Ukraine. So maybe so, but I think it's not going to be super obvious how this works out.
The director of the Stockholm Institute for Transition Economics, Torbjörn Becker. Thank you very much, Torbjörn.
Thank you.